Hi, I'm Tim. Join me in this video as I show you 12 ways that you can crash your RC model airplane. Let's get to it. I've been flying radio control model aircraft for over 50 years, and I've had a lot of flights during that time. The other day I was checking my logbook of my RC model airplanes and I found something that surprised me, but it was true. In all that 50 years of flying, I have never crashed an RC model airplane. I've just never crashed. It's a little bit surprising, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so maybe I have had a few model airplane crashes. They happen. So we can learn from the crashes, and in this video, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I'm going to go over 12 ways to crash your model airplane that you may not have been aware that you're doing and will lead to a quicker crash than just by normal flying. The first very standard way to crash a model airplane is do not ever do a pre-flight of your model before you take off to the sky. Just put it out there, take off, and just see what happens. During pre-flights, you can see things like maybe there's a loose wheel, the prop is not right, there could be some control linkage damage. Pre-flights are pretty important. Even when I pick up the airplane to take it out to the flight line, I will hold it by its center of gravity just to make sure that it's somewhat balanced. Also, if you haven't flown an airplane for a while, just something can break in transit to the car, a spectator could have touched it. So if you want a pretty foolproof way of crashing an RC model airplane, just skip the pre-flight that you run as you take it out to the flight line. One item of pre-flight that happened a couple of weeks ago at the field, a modeler brought his airplane out, the wings were held on by rubber bands, he got distracted putting it together. He only put on 2 rubber bands, never ran a pre-flight, took off with the 2 rubber bands, just about lost the model. Another tried and true technique to crash your model airplane is skip doing any control surface check before takeoff. If you do a control surface check before you take off, the plane is taxiing out to the runway, have it stop. Make sure all your controls are free and moving in the quite right direction: elevator, rudder, aileron. The elevator and rudder are pretty obvious if the airplane's behind you, if the right or wrong direction. The ailerons are a little bit, you've got to think about how they work for the bank control. If you skip this pre-flight control check and your controls are hooked up backwards for whatever reason, you'll be almost impossible to catch it in time. You'll be so jolted and surprised on the takeoff. In addition to the controls are free and moving in the proper direction, and this is something everybody does, full scale and modelers. Even when I was flying the Boeing 777, we did a full control check before we took off. We couldn't see the controls because of the size of the airplane. We could on the computer screen. In addition to where the controls are going, make sure that they move the full amount. Quite recently at the field, there was a modeler, very good flyer. He preferred ARFs, which is fine. He had a nice P-39, did a good job with a specialized nose gear on it. He was on a maiden flight, did not check the control full movement. As he went to rotate for takeoff, he had just enough elevator to leave the ground, scooted around about 10 feet, trying to circle back to the field. When he brought the model back, it had essentially no up elevator. So make sure the controls move in the proper direction and they move enough for you to fly your airplane. Another more long-term way to crash your model, get in the habit of not checking the weather before you fly. Now, when you're flying full-scale airplanes, visibility is pretty important. With visibility with our model airplanes, we kind of get an idea how much visibility we need to safely fly our models. Slower ones, maybe a little bit less visibility. You're flying a jet, you're going to need more. But there are three things I look at for weather. I look at the visibility, I look at the wind, and I look at the sun angle. The wind is pretty important. The more wind there is, the harder it is to fly a model. And it may not just be fun. It depends on the size of the model. Heavier models will handle wind better than light ones. Remember the wind, you'll also have a crosswind factor when you fly. You're just going to have to determine what your comfort levels are with wind based on your model and your skill level. Remember, if the wind is a crosswind, if your club rules allow it, I always prefer taking off into the wind. My models are such I can make it take off across the width of the runway if it's going into the wind, so long as that's okay with your rules. Also in the landing, anything you do to land into the wind. The sun angle is really important for flying RC models because if you look right into the sun and you're flying your model, you can lose it for a second into the sun. Each field will have their own setup to where the sun is, to include the seasons. I know at our field, early in the morning, we can be looking pretty directly into a low sun. We just have to understand that's the way it is. I move my flying to one end of the field or the other, or if it's a cloudy day, we don't have to worry about it. But again, disregard the weather. That's a good longer-term method to crash your RC model airplane. Another way to crash your airplane, and this is a pretty simple, foolproof technique. It'll work in all situations. Do not ever check your batteries to see what the charge are. So for electric-powered models, we'll have some sort of LiPo battery that powers everything. For those of you flying with gas engines, you still have a battery in the airplane handling the electronics. This is a LiPo. We charge it after every flight. It is incredibly easy to check the state of the battery charge. First, make sure you get quality batteries and there's no deformations from puffing or anything like that. What we do is, and I have a video on this, we have a battery checker. They're super easy to use. You simply take the balancer from your battery, the black wire up, you connect it into the top ones. The battery itself powers a checker. You can see this one is 73% charged, and obviously this was after a flight. Remember, when you charge your batteries, you should fly with them 100% charged. I always use the timer on my transmitter. I start off with a 5-minute timer, fly at my normal power settings. When I land, I check the battery to see if I can increase the flight times. The timer is a great thing with its minute countdowns to make sure that you're flying with a good battery and land before it runs out of juice. Another more sophisticated way to crash your RC model aircraft and at the same time crash somebody else's model aircraft is disregard aircraft in the traffic pattern. Just go ahead and take off and hope that you don't have a midair. So it's just a fact that if we're flying on weekends, there's usually other people flying at the air at the same time. You're going to have to make a determination if you want to fly when there's 3 or 4 other aircraft up there. I also try to take a look at the mix of aircraft. If some people are flying pretty fast and there's a lot of airplanes up there, I may just wait a little bit till they land, because people that are flying very fast aircraft usually aren't looking out for other aircraft. There's a higher chance of having a midair. When you do take off with other aircraft, try to pay attention to the landing runway. The wind may be calm. It could be left to right or right to left. Try to determine what it is. Announce that prior to your takeoff. Let people know that you're taking off. Try to join the general flow of traffic around that airfield. And when it comes time to land, just say that you're landing left to right, right to left, to give an awareness to people that you are landing, and it'd be a safer thing to do. Also, my personal technique, if I'm ever doing a maiden flight, a flight for a first time on any RC model, if there's just a lot that I'm concentrated on, I try to remove as many problems as I can. That would include other aircraft in the air. If I'm doing my maiden flight, I'll show up very early at the field to fly by myself, or if there's other people there, usually as a courtesy, if you say I want to do a maiden flight, they'll give you a 5-minute window to do that maiden flight. Another pretty important way that you can crash your RC model, don't ever practice on a computer-based RC flight simulator. Don't do that. The computer-based RC flight simulators have revolutionized RC flying. They're really quite affordable. You have a transmitter, they call it a controller usually, and the models behave very well on your computer, especially if you have a larger screen with the color displays. The RC flight simulators are a great way to practice flying when it's bad weather, when it's wintertime, travel or work, you can't get out to the field on a regular basis. Also, the sims are very useful if you're going up to more advanced models, higher performance acrobatic models or jet flyers. The sims are a great way to learn how to fly that. I have used Real Flight Simulator. There are certainly other ones out there. And the other thing to keep in mind, if you're checking these simulators, do some YouTube research. Most of these simulators run on a Windows-based program. You have to look hard for a Mac-based RC flight simulator. Another way that you can get a pretty good crash out of your model, it's a little bit more advanced, is fly at full power all the time. Just simply fly at full power. The model will zoom around, it'll go very fast. You'll be the center of attention racing around the field. Keep in mind, at this full power setting, your battery is going to drain pretty quickly. Keep that in the back of your mind as you fly. And also, you have no room for error for a disorientation, not sure if the model's going to or away from you. As an added benefit, if you're going fast, full throttle, you lose orientation and it flies away, you may never recover the model in the crash because it's so far away. So again, full power is a more advanced technique to crash your RC model airplane, and it works pretty good. Tied in with full power flying, another way to crash your RC model is fly as low an altitude as possible. The lower you can get, you'll have a much better chance of a crash. So obviously I'm kidding a little bit. I enjoy flying low and slow, but I have models that are designed to fly low and slow. I just like to see them flying. I can keep them pretty close in. They're low flying. There are other people that have pretty high performance models fly very low. And the downside of doing all this is you have no room for error. If one thing goes wrong, you go up instead of down, the model's going to crash before you can recover it. So it's great fun flying low altitude. It looks great with first person view and so forth, but it's a pretty good way to crash a model if you consistently fly in that manner. Again, thinking ahead, you want to plan ahead to crash your model. A pretty good technique is to buy and fly an aircraft that is above your flying skill level. We all have a level of flying skills from our models. It could be a sport flyer, it could be a large aircraft. Whatever aircraft we fly, there's some other aircraft out there that is a higher performance, more difficult to fly model. I'm always amazed when we see these air shows of people flying SR-71s, U-2s, and things like that. These are advanced models, are hard to fly. You can certainly do them with practice training, the right models building up to that, flight simulators. But if you just want to get a jump on the crash, just get a very advanced, preferably high-speed swept wing model, and that will lead you to a crash really quite quickly. Another fairly easy standard way to crash a model aircraft, add as many distractions as possible to what you're doing at the RC field. Distractions could be other aircraft up in the sky. We've all had the experience of a modeler talking to you about your aircraft or this, that, or the other while you're flying. Just there could be commotion behind you. Anytime you have a distraction that takes away from your concentration on the model, that will assist you with a crash. If there's nothing you can do about these distractions, the best thing to do is to try to disregard those distractions, land the model as soon as possible, and just wait for that distraction to go away. For sure, anytime you're doing a maiden flight, a first flight on an aircraft, no distractions. Make sure that anybody's out there at the field with you understands you've got to give this model your full concentration. Distractions will contribute to an airplane crash. And the final tip to crash your RC model pretty quick, and this is a special tip for viewers of this channel, find a very small area to fly in with a lot of obstructions like poles and trees and stuff like that. You'll find that you'll crash pretty quickly in that environment, especially in the smaller areas. So thank you for viewing this video. It was obviously a tongue-in-cheek view at how to crash an RC model airplane. Nobody wants to crash a model airplane, but crashes do happen. So what we try to do is learn from those crashes, what went wrong so we don't do it again. When you go to the crash site, get the model quickly. I want to get to any crash site fast because the battery could be damaged in the crash. There's always a fire hazard. When I get to the crash site, I disconnect the battery, bring it back, let everything, emotions calm down a little bit, Very important to do a very thorough check because on the crashes that I've had, the propeller's turning, I've seen motor wires caught up in the motor, servos may be damaged. A lot of things can go wrong in that crash. Just take your time, get it fixed before you fly again. This is probably not the best time to do a field repair. Bring it back to the shop, get it done right for your future flights.